Welcome back. Another episode of CapandTrade, episode 53. Got Mr. DJ Bien-Aime of ESPN will be joining us here shortly. But as always, I am your guest, TexansCap. You can follow me on Twitter at TexansCap. This is the CapandTrade YouTube show. Also do a little bit of writing over on my Substack. You can check that out at capandtrade.substack.com. So we got a lot to get to tonight. And like I said, DJ will be joining us here momentarily. But just a lot, continuation of what we've been talking about the past couple of weeks, especially with D'Amico Ryans being hired on. And now we're at the point of looking at coaching staff and what direction this team's going to go with the coaching staff. And it seems that they're going to really take their time on this one. By all accounts, they've only conducted just a few interviews and have many more to come. So, it doesn't look like they're in any hurry, and doesn't appear like they may be trying to zone in on anybody beyond Bobby Slowick that may be in the play, from the San Francisco squad, and then doesn't really seem to be keying in on anybody that's in the Super Bowl. So at this point, the team looks like they can really take their time and really do some in-depth interviews and make sure that they find the right fits for D'Amico versus trying to build something by name brand. It looks like they really just want to pick the guys that really fit what they're looking to do and fit the culture and fit the systems that they want to deploy and things like that. So it's it's an exciting time, and it's good to see them kind of picking from different buckets across the league, right? So that part's really interesting to me. I think it was kind of easy just to default that he would just pick people from, try to pick off of the Jets squad or the 49ers coaching staff, things like that, because that was, has a lot of ties to him and the systems that he runs or may want to run. But they really seem to be venturing out and taking a look, across the league of what would really work in Houston, who would work really well with D'Amico, who would work really well with Nick Caserio. It seems to be a very collaborative process, and that's what we heard a lot during the initial press conference. And so that part's, is pretty exciting for me as well to hear that, and I've never seen Nick quite as loose as we saw him during that initial press conference with D'Amico. So that part, is good to see, and I don't know what that says about the previous staff, previous administration, things like that, but he's really seems pretty content with this coaching hire. And that part is good to see. I was kind of leery. I didn't know how he really felt about D'Amico, but maybe that first and second interview really sealed the deal with Nick. I by all accounts, it seems like the McNairs were one really kind of driving that ship to begin with. And now that Caserio's on board and ready to go, it looks like could be a very good, a strong duo between the two of them. So good to see everybody in. See, we got Ryan. I don't know how you got in here, but you did. So we'll check your key card before that. Jim, good to see you. Gridiron, as always, good to see you. Beige, yeah, welcome in, bud. Good to see you again. But DJ's getting loaded up. He'll be on with us in just a few seconds. So STX, you're right. It looks like he's ready to go. So STX Caps, been watching for a while. First time coming, you're killing it, man. I appreciate the support. Yeah, dig up the contract video on Tunsil. So yeah, if you didn't get a chance to check that out, last Wednesday we did a real deep dive into Laramie Tunsil and a contract extension. So go back and check the feed after the show's over, and you can take a look at that. We built a full contract out for him to kind of explanatory things on how that extension will work. So definitely take a look at that. So, all right, so let's go ahead and bring in Mr. DJ here, get him joined into the show. Let me get things swapped around here. DJ.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Chilling, man. I'm chilling, man. I just got back from Phoenix not too long
ago. Yeah, that's right. I remember you were saying you were flying back today. Made it back just in time.
Yeah, I actually got back to my apartment at 8:30.
Oh goodness, man, we cut it close then, didn't we?
Yeah. Y'all did, but it's all good though.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the time, sir. Thank you for joining me tonight. Discuss a little bit of what's going on with the Texans, and just right off the top, you've been here, you've been covering the team now for 8 months now, and
Right.
I've really enjoyed your coverage on the team and the kind of the fresh air takes that you have. It's not the kind of groupthink kind of way of style for you. You kind of seem to have a really your own individual uh, attitude towards things and aspects on things. So, I mean, how are you enjoying Houston so far? You're 8 months in.
I mean, I love living in Houston.
Yeah.
Houston is a beautiful place for a guy like me. I can't complain, I mean, I'm just blessed overall across the board. I mean, I really enjoy working with the Houston Texans, covering them. Like the PR staff makes like life pretty easy to maneuver and get stories and things like that. They're just good people to deal with overall. The players are cool. I was able to build some really good relationships, do some really cool stories. Like, obviously the General Petrie one, because that one comes to mind. Obviously, I did one with Derek Stingley about, just him having been kind of battle tested for the NFL, having, play practice against guys like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, and then in games going against guys like Devonta Smith and CeeDee Lamb and so forth and so forth. So that was pretty cool, man. And then so forth and so forth. So I'm really enjoying it. I'm just glad overall, though, that they picked a coach that energizes the fan base. Because, I mean, you went to games and you saw how just sometimes dead the stadium felt, week to week basis, after like week I want to say like week 6 or whatever, like it was just kind of.
Yeah, when the opponent's jerseys outnumber your jerseys in the
Man.
stadium, it gets a little rough, and it was pretty dreadful there, especially the back end of the season. And maybe like you said, this is step one of energizing the fan base, and hopefully this starts getting fans back to the stadium and season tickets start getting booked up again and things like that, and get back to the sold out stadium ways that many of us are so accustomed to seeing. It's still hard to this day to see the stadium, semi empty like that. But yeah, talking about D'Amico Ryans, and I know it's been kind of a week-long honeymoon fanfare for him, and it's almost kind of still surreal for me to see it actually truly happen. Last year he was on he was doing a few interviews and realized, decided it wasn't the best time for him, and all season long, once people started realizing Lovie Smith wasn't the long-term solutions, everybody was already kind of baking into D'Amico as an option. And myself personally, I had trouble seeing it actually happen. I didn't really think it would really come to fruition like this. And it's really, really surreal to see it. It's great to see the fans energized about it. The part that's really cool to me is the players and how exciting. I mean, I've never seen this amount of feedback from the players themselves when it comes to a head coach hire.
Yeah, nah. As we said, right now they're in a honeymoon stage, and it's that again, re-energizing the fan base. I think that's what is not obviously most important, but that's really cool to see. I think whenever they get their next quarterback, it's only going to further energize them, and I can already imagine those training camp practices are going to have a boatload of energy day in and day out. Because again, as I told people before, last year during training camp, it just felt like there was no energy there for the most part. Fans showed up, but it didn't feel like the fans had much to truly cheer about. So now that they're gonna have their new head coach, the new quarterback of the future, some weapons to go with that quarterback, energized bunny in D'Amico Ryans who's going to energize the team offensively, defensively, and that's going to be able to feed off into the crowd during training camp practice. Because training camp is one of my favorite times of the year.
Yeah,
because you get to see what the team really looks like. Because for the most part, things do change a little bit throughout the year, but for the most part, the people that stand out in training camp, what the team looks like in training camp for the most part is what you're actually going to see throughout the season. Because that's why I really follow a lot of reports. One example is, the Patriots in training camp. You kept hearing that the offense looks really, it looks really funky.
It's combobulated. Yeah,
right. There doesn't look like there's a good synergy the offense, the passing attack specifically does not look good. And then we saw throughout the year, Mac Jones had a massive regression, right? Same with like, the Texans, where I was saying like the defense actually might be able to hold up a little bit, especially in the pass game. And we saw that. They were the only team in the NFL that finished more interceptions than touchdowns allowed.
Right.
Now the rush defense, it was what it was. But again, like even during training camp, you saw Dameon Pierce consistently making plays. You saw Cooks making plays. So like some of those things translated over. So that's probably my favorite. That's probably why I'm most excited to see this upcoming season. Now, obviously, I'm kind of ahead of myself. We still got the draft, we still got free agency, but he still has to assemble his staff. So, there's a ways away, but I like to sometimes think, look way down the line.
Oh yeah, no, it's easy. It's easy to make that jump down that way, and he's so infectious, and I think that's what we were talking about right before you got on here was the coaching staff and how they're really kind of taking their time, and they're not honing in just on San Francisco or any of the two teams that are in the Super Bowl, and they really seem to be taking their time, really diving deep into potential options across the league. Things have gotten a little quiet on the offensive coordinator side of things. I don't know if that's a sign that Slowick is more or less a shoot in for the job, but the defensive side has been really interesting. One name I wanted to talk to you about was Mark Manuel from the Jets. If you had any information on him from your time up there covering them, I think he may have only crossed over for 1 year up there, but him. And then, we saw Chris Harris get an interview, even though he got announced to the Titans as their in their staff, but that would be a promotion if Houston were to offer him the defensive coordinator job. So he could still slide over that. And then the news came down just as of late with Matt Burke out of Arizona, going to be requested for an interview as well. So out of those three names on the defensive side, do you have any initial thoughts?
I would say like if I had to pick, Burke has been in DC before. I remember he was with Miami. Everybody knows that, I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, but I remember him with Miami. I think he was he wasn't on the Adam Gase staff, so he had to be the staff before that. So I had to be the Joe Philbin staff. Those years, Philbin really had a really good staff. The defenses, they were never elite, but like they were always for the most part pretty sound. Granted, he had some really good players to work with. Those few years, I think he had Cameron Wade, he had Rashad Jones, he had Brent Grimes. So I know that he can build a defense to like accentuate a guy like Derek Stingley's ability. Same with Jalen Petrie. Jalen Petrie kind of reminded me a little bit of Rashad Jones, where he's just more of that playmaking type safety that's around the box, that can play deep, that can make plays, just gonna make plays on the ball, which Jalen Petrie did. Marquand Manuel, we crossed over for about 1 year, but I was like, be able to build a decent relationship with him because he's from Miami, so he actually knows my high school. Apparently, he knows my high school coach that I played under. But he's a really good teacher. That's one thing that I peeped, that he knows how to communicate what he wants to teach the guy. Because it's easy to tell somebody to do this at this moment, but he's really good at being able to break it down in a way that is digestible for players, especially young players. Because older guys, they've heard a lot. They kind of are who they are as players, so they already kind of seen a lot. They just need a little bit of guidance. But young players, they need to be developed. They're basically like a mold of clay, and he's really good at forming them into the way that they need to be. I know it says safety coach, but he worked with the defensive back. He worked with basically all the defensive back. He worked with some of the slot cornerbacks. Outside corners was strictly Tony Odom, but he for sure worked with some of the nickelback corners like Michael Carter II, who was one of the better nickel cornerbacks in the entire NFL this past season. I know, Sauce and DJ Reed get a lot of praise, but Michael Carter II had a very good year, especially in the slot. So he's really good at developing younger guys. And now him as an entire DC, I can't really speak to that because, that's a completely different role. Like you're orchestrating, blitz packages, you're orchestrating, making sure everybody's in unison from the D-line to linebackers to obviously, secondary. But a funny nugget, though, is Marquand Manuel. So the Jets hosted, they coached the Senior Bowl last year.
Right.
So Marquand Manuel worked directly with Jalen Petrie because Jalen Petrie's on, so he worked directly with him. And I remember there was times I don't know if I'm about to say this, but it's been over a year, man. Yeah. But I sat in on a couple of those meetings. So I saw him kind of coach up Petrie and things like that. And you could see that synergy, that vibe that he can have with younger players. So he was I wouldn't be against hiring him. He remembers my face. I remember his face. We both from the same area, so I wouldn't have any issues with Marco Emmanuel being the DC. So that's kind of that.
Yeah, and then we saw Matt Burke, like you mentioned, he's been around a few places, and coming out of Arizona, maybe JJ Watt has something to say. Looked like maybe from Hard Knocks, Matt Burke might have been one of the ones orchestrating the little goodbye video for JJ as well that we saw. So, but yeah, I mean, it's no big flashy names per se, but I don't think that's truly needed. I think you just need to find the right coaches that are willing to install the same culture and the same attitude and the same message to your locker room. If that is a cohesive message across the staff, then that's what you're really looking for. And by all accounts, I think D'Amico's going to be able to deliver that. He just needs to follow through the rest of his way down. And hopefully, I don't know if you've heard anything on Frank Ross or not. I think pretty much most of the fan base, including myself, hopes that he's still around, because that, the special teams unit, regardless of what you may think about it, they were a top 3 unit all year long. And there's no reason why they shouldn't retain him at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the special team unit, like, you could always count on Fairbairn to make his kicks. And obviously,
he quietly was a very good kicker this year.
Yeah, man. Yeah. At a certain point, that was the only, line of offense that they could get, they could generate throughout the year. But he did his thing. The punting game was pretty good. I don't really recall outside of like one game where they kind of got, they gave a punt return. I believe that was against the Browns. That's the only I can actually remember.
Yep.
Yeah, it was against the Browns. Where Peoples-Jones took it back to the crib. But that's about it. They're pretty solid in that. And on top of it, on kickoff returns, like how many times did they give a big kickoff return? And they forced multiple turnovers on kickoff. I remember they forced one against the Colts, and they forced one against somebody else. I can't remember it right now. I think it might have been against the Chargers. I know it was MJ Stewart who forced it.
Yeah.
It could have been his Chargers game. I know it was for sure a home game. It might have been MJ Stewart. It was MJ Stewart. It probably was the Chargers. But again, like, we saw them make plays. Like, you could always count on the special teams unit coming through against week in and week out. I would say that the special teams unit played a big part in them getting their first win against the Jaguars. Yep. There were times where the offense was kind of sputtering, or like they would move the ball, but they would get close to midfield and then they would punt, and then they would keep it within the 5, keep it within the 10, and then force the Jaguars to have to go all the drive the entire length. That's just hard to do for most teams. Eventually they'll make a mistake, as we saw in that game where Trevor Lawrence threw a pick to Derek Stingley Jr. in the red zone. Well, in the end zone, actually. So, Frank Ross was he did a marvelous job this past season.
So, speaking on players on the team currently on the roster, they only have 50 players under contract at this year, but maybe specifically talking towards the 2022 draft class, maybe even picking into the 21 draft class. What players do you think? And we don't know what schemes are going to be run yet per se, but what players do you think stand to gain with this new whatever coaching staff comes in, especially with D'Amico Ryans on the defensive side of things?
Oh, I mean, I think scheme-wise, they're going to run this defense. They're going to run the same scheme that
wide Niners
and with the Niners. It's going to be basically the same scheme that the Jets run. That's why I have some familiarity with that. Okay. And then obviously, if they hire Bobby Slowick to be the OC, they're going to run the Kyle Shanahan West Coast offense.
Right. So given just using those two as our placeholder schemes, then
right.
Which players do you think are looking that could continue on their growth, whether it's Petrie or somebody who could take a big step forward?
Yeah, so I would say Petrie without question. I would also say Derek Stingley Jr., Steven Nelson, because what they're really good at, those two corners specifically, they're really good at bump and run and playing press coverage. And one thing that this scheme does is they make life really easy for cornerbacks. Not the same, like the job is easy, but like they take a lot of pressure off of them because they don't really ask them to do too much. You're going to see them in either man, you're going to see them in cover 3, quarter, half, and then quarters. That's basically it. and they're going to coach them up to the point where, they're going to know not exactly what to expect, but as long as they study and they do their part, do that aspect, they'll have a really good feel because the coaches are going to coach them up and prep them for these situations. So they'll be able to know what certain things are coming so they can play it better. Because that's one thing that Sauce and DJ Reed were able to do in New York at a high level is they knew they'd have the coverage wrong because they had a ferocious D-line. Now, obviously, the Texans D-line is not what the Jets had, but if they can add a couple more pieces, because it's not like, the Texans D-line is just a wasteland. Like you had Hughes, who had basically 10 sacks. You had Obo, who finished with 5 sacks in his last 8 starts. We know what Gennard can do, who had 8 in 12 games in 2021. So we know that D-line has some talent. They got to add a little bit more, of course. But I think that, once they improve that, it's only going to help the cornerbacks. And again, with the D-line, like, it's strictly, the D-line, I already know what they're going to say. It's all about knockback, pushing the line of scrimmage backwards, and shooting upfield. Because some defensive schemes, the DNs and some of the D tackles, they have to I think it's called read block, but either way, where like they'll engage and read what's going on versus where in this system, to my knowledge, it's okay. We want the D linemen to shoot upfield, and then we have the linebackers replace them and replace the gaps that they create.
Okay.
So, yeah. So
that takes a lot of lane and gap discipline on the linebackers, which is something this team has sorely lacked, unfortunately.
Agreed. Completely agreed there. No arguments there. So, I know I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent, but so Stingley, Gennard, Petrie, I think Steven Nelson played at the same level he was playing at this past year. He played at a very good level. Now, if we go to the offensive side, I would say that, I've talked to some players that feel that the West Coast scheme makes the tackle's life a lot easier. So I would say we can expect Tunsil to play at an even better level, specifically in the run game. We expecting him to play at an even higher level. The same with Titus Howard, because they're really, athletic, and obviously they're really good in pass pro. Like we saw what they did. Now, one player that I would say would have to, this scheme could cause some issues for them is Kenyon Green. Not because Kenyon Green doesn't have the talent. I think he has the talent. He's just going to have to make sure he gets his physical physique the way it needs to be, because they require very athletic, agile offensive linemen that the lateral quickness is on point, play in and play out. Because, when they run the outside zone scheme, you're going to have to really reach to go get, whether it's replace that defensive tackle, or if you're going to have to work up to get to that linebacker.
Right.
Because this past season, they ran a little bit of that, but a lot of it was more regular, gap blocking schemes, which Ken Green can do that at a very high level. So that I would say that's that next step for him and his maturation, just so he can be able to do that at a good enough level, and then obviously he has to get better in pass pro. So at the receiver spot, I think Pierce, it don't matter what scheme you put him in, he's gonna eat.
I'm curious to see if he's able to continue on in a zone scheme, if that fits his running style or not.
He'll be just fine, because Pierce, he's one gap and go.
Right.
Yeah, one cut and go. And then at receiver, I'm really interested to see this because Nico Collins is more of a 50-50, more a 50-50 guy. Yep. That doesn't necessarily work in the West Coast scheme unless you have the lateral quickness to get in and out your breaks and separate, which he showed flashes of being able to do that. Again, his one touchdown pass against the Giants, touchdown catch, one of them against the Giants, he basically ran a slow go, and he created massive separation for that touchdown. So it's not like he can't do it. You got to be able to do it at a high enough level. That's kind of why, Denzel Mims with New York, he kind of faded away because he's not really that much of a separator. That's not really his game. So I'm really interested to see that. Obviously, Cook stays. He's an easy fit with this scheme, and he's right. He's played in it with the LA Rams, because obviously McVay is from the Kyle Shanahan tree. So they still got to add at that position regardless.
Yeah.
Whether they keep Cooks or not, because there's a very specific type of, like, they prefer separators who can separate not vertically, horizontally, be able to create that space to, get into that window because, obviously it's a timing based offense, which obviously most offenses are timing based, but they really like harp on that. Like you got to be at a specific spot within the timing of a quarterback's drop back. You know what I'm saying? So like if a quarterback is trying to hit like a dig about 15 yards, when he hits that back foot, let's say it's on step, he's throwing it to a specific spot. That's basically what you saw in Miami with Tua Tagovailoa within that offense, where everything was basically timing rhythm. Where Tua got to a certain spot, he threw the ball was coming out, which is why you kind of saw them have issues in December once teams started to disrupt that rhythm.
Yeah, Staley with Chargers just took away the middle of the field completely away from him, and it just threw him off big time.
Exactly. So I'm really, so those are some of the little things that I been able to disseminate from just that scheme overall on both sides. I actually have a book that talks about the West Coast, like the Kyle Shanahan West Coast offense. So I bought it for last season when I thought I was gonna cover the Jets. Obviously, I'm covering the Texans. So now, obviously I can't run away from that tree. So I'll be back reading that book again.
What's the name of the book?
Man, it's by this one dude named Bobby Peters, but it's basically like he goes through the majority of the plays that they ran throughout the year, and then like he explains what he thinks was supposed to happen or how it's supposed to unravel, things of that nature. But apparently everybody that I've talked to that know about him in that book, they've all raved about him. Like people that were on those coaching staffs, they've raved about him. So I would say that the book's pretty accurate. But I have to, I'll DM it to you and let you know what it looks like. Show you what it's like.
Yeah. No, I mean, you touched on a lot there, and I think there's plenty of names that on this roster that should benefit from this scheme. Like you said, it definitely the secondary, definitely with Stingley. We saw him being out of place last year, but the wide receiver core is something and that's a very good point that I think it's going to be interesting to watch to see how they handle the Cook situation. I think majority, at least from the fan base side, are just ready to just, go ahead and make the trade, probably take pennies on the dollar and move on. They, from what I can tell, most of the fans did not like his back and forth mentality. And then, just didn't seem like he wanted to be here at the end of the season. And if that's the case, that's fine and move on. I just don't know. I think the sentiment is he would do well. I think in this scheme, I think he would be very successful. Like you said, he still has speed. He still has ways. He's a very good route runner, and he would excel in this system. But I'm just not entirely sure the fan base would like to see him back around. So we'll see what happens between D'Amico and this staff and Brandon Cooks. But Nico Collins is somebody that's the same questions I had: is how is his skill set? How is it going to fit into this system? And you would hope that they just would find a way to find his place within this system, whether it's at the first, second set or the second level in the receiving game. And, we saw with Lance Zierlein with his mock draft, he had sent Jalen Hyatt to Houston in his mock draft because he was a separator, kind of that Will Fuller type speed burner. And that's, that if Brandon Cooks is moved off of this team, they really don't have anybody with that type of speed, and if Mechie comes back, which is, sounds like the prognosis is good for him, but it's hard to still count on that being out of football for a year. So this team definitely needs a lot of help in the wide receiver department and free agency, which is something we'll dabble in here in a minute. Free agency at wide receiver is pretty bleak. So
yeah, no,
they're either going to have to, whether it's facilitating a trade or, really getting heavy into the position in the draft. So they'll have to figure out something there. But there's the other player would curious to see what direction they go at linebacker. To keep Christian Kirksey here. His salary and cap charge is pretty low, but I think he turns 31 this year. And can Christian Harris play that middle linebacker position, or is it something that they would, release Kirksey and then try to reinvest back into the position? There's a pretty strong linebacker group, both in the draft and in free agency this year. So do you have any initial thoughts on Harrison Kirksey at linebacker?
I think Harris can be a quality will backer in this scheme, since a lot of it is, kind of going east and west.
Mm-hmm.
And they really value guys that can cover ground, whether it's through zone, obviously in the pass game and in the run game, right? Because if, you have your D-line, this is specifically in the run game, you got your D-line causing havoc and, basically shooting gaps and trying to get upfield, that's going to, kind of muddy up. It's going to muddy up some things. And so if the guy bounces, you got to be able to run back bounce. You got to be able to get him. Obviously this past year, we all know his ability to consistently do his run fits, execute his run fits was inconsistent. But, he missed half of the season with his hamstring injury. And then, he's a rookie. So, there's a lot to learn. And, apparently, like, the linebacker scheme for linebackers in the Lovie Smith system can be a little difficult, can be a little taxing for, especially on a young player, because they just require a lot out of them.
Yeah, so, they're not all Brian Urlacher.
Yeah, it's not Brian Urlacher and Lance Briggs.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and then obviously with Kersey, I think Kersey's a solid veteran. I don't think that they really need to move off of him. If they want to add one more linebacker, that's fine. But I don't think they need to move off of him.
Yeah, I think my contention on Kirksey is you keep him here, get him into training camp, and see how he does in this system, and then make the decision at the 53-man roster cut down. And he may surprise you and still may be very effective, or at worst case scenario become very good linebacker depth.
Right.
So, but yeah, and moving towards free agency, I think at least on the defensive side of the ball, like we talked about, linebacker has some decent strong players, and then interior defensive line I think is going to be a point of emphasis. Not only just it should be for Houston, but it's going to be across the league. There's a number of players that are going to be heading into potential extensions. Dexter Lawrence, Christian Wilkins, Quinnen Williams, players like that, and I think that's a market that's destined for a little market adjustment. And so Houston could potentially look there, and there's quite a few names that they could be looking at different price points as well, right?
Right.
Whether it's Deron Payne or Hargrave out of Philadelphia, or you drop down. I don't know if Jones out of Denver is really a fit coming out of a 3-4 scheme, but
right.
There's some players there. So I feel like Roy Lopez is a rotational player. Malik Collins is a solid player, but unless they make a big adjustment in the draft, I feel like interior defensive line's an area that they could potentially spend at in free agency.
Yeah, man. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think I've obviously looked at the free agency market. I haven't really done too much diving into that yet. I mean, obviously, I looked at linebackers though, as you mentioned. I know that Tremaine Edmonds is going to be a free agent. Devontae Davis will be a free agent. Like there's actually some solid pieces at the linebacker spot. D-line, I haven't looked too much at that because again, like the way I look at it is like if you got a good if you have a good D tackle or good, 3-tech nose, whatever, 5-tech, whatever, they just don't hit the market.
They don't.
They do not, because it's so hard to find those guys that can legitimately like impact, a defense on a play-to-play basis. So they do have to get that shirt up because a lot of the issues were stemmed around the fact that their interior defensive line just wasn't good enough. It got better at the end when Malik Collins got healthy.
Yeah, he really came on the back half of the season.
Yeah,
every week it just got a little more burst and a little
right. Yeah, but like you could feel when you watch the games, you could feel like Malik Collins' presence play in and play out. I am interested to see what Devin Booker looks like in this scheme in year 2. Granted, he was obviously a rookie second-round pick. Can't really expect too much out of him, but I do wonder what he looks like going into year 2 in this scheme. So they for sure have to add some in free agency, and obviously add some in the draft. I would prefer probably them going for the free agency route for detail, get you another solid player, and then obviously edge in the draft. Because again, like can't have enough of those guys. You know what I'm saying? Can't have enough D linemen.
And free agency is such a crapshoot, and it's what I tell everybody when it comes to free agency. Not only are you paying market, retail value for the player, but you got to ask yourself, why is the team letting him walk?
Exactly.
You know, if a team really wants a player, 99% of the time they can find a way to keep the player. Very rarely is it just a cash or a cap reason that a player's not re-signed. So, you know, unless it's a change in system, change in scheme, or there's something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. But from a performance aspect, that's usually the first question I'm asking is why is the player hitting the free market? And it could be just a simple function of, you know, the team is not coming to the same number that him and his agent are seeing, and he wants to see the market and see what his market value is going to be. And, you know, that's one way to take a look at it. But free agency, it's difficult. I think I wrote about it. So I wrote about it last year on the newsletter, just looking at free agency value, looking at the contract APYs versus the OTC valuation number. And only 2 teams had positive net value from their free agents signed across the whole league. Everybody else was negative value.
Who are the 2 teams?
Oh gosh, now I have to go back and look. I wrote that one many years ago, or many months ago.
You could
find it. But
you could DM that to me.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and find it and see if I could. I was gonna see if I could find it real quick, but I don't think I did. Back in February. Oh, there it is. Free agency value. Let's see here real quick. We got a few seconds here. It was 4 teams. It was the Steelers, the Rams, the Saints, and the Raiders. Everybody else was negative value. And your New York Jets were last. So, but yeah, I mean, free agency at the end of the day, it's a crapshoot. It's very rare. I mean, Houston, we got spoiled with Jonathan Joseph in that kind of free agency signing, but very rare do you nail it. It's usually a 1 or 2 deal. But there's some other names on there, and I wanted to ask one name about with you would be Sheldon Rankins. You know, he's going to be a free agent. Is he going to have any value, you think, for this type of system?
Yeah, I mean, he apparently he had a solid year his last year in New York, so I wouldn't be surprised. You know, that'd be a good fit because like he's really good at getting upfield. He's a really good pass rush and D tackle. The run game, he got better in year 2 in the system. So obviously, if he goes into, granted, he was playing with somebody good D lineman, but
yeah,
he goes into, you know, basically, let's say he comes to Houston and he's in that same type of system. Basically his 3rd year. Yeah, I mean, it would be basically like, you know, he already mastered the language per se. So I could see them possibly going after him because, you know, I think one thing a lot of us underestimate is the value of having just good players on your roster, quality starters on your roster. They may not be stars, they may not even be like borderline Pro Bowl players, but you know, play in and play out, you can count on them to execute and do their job. And by them doing their job, that allows the star players around them to make plays. And I think sometimes we kind of get caught up. We lose sight of the fact that if you don't have good players or quality players around your stars won't be able to show you why they are stars. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, no, definitely on that. You know, I think linebacker and safety are probably the only other 2 areas that free agency has some value, but I think linebacker, it's kind of really top heavy. I think you know, there's 2 or 3 players at the top, and then beyond there, it's kind of more rotational players. But I think TJ Edwards, who's playing, you know, obviously playing this weekend, and you know, I think the big name is Tremaine Edmonds out of Buffalo is going to be probably one of the most sought out after linebackers if Buffalo's not able to retain him. Leighton Van Der Esch up at out of Dallas. You know, that might be a player. And then there's a kid out of the Chargers, I think. Drew Tranquil.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
That's the name that's been kind of creeping up a little bit on the on my timeline. And then another one which Ryan dropped in the comment box, Devin Bush. That one I don't know. He's young. He's only 24. His numbers this year. I mean, he was healthy all year, but I'm not sure. I'll have to dive in more. And like DJ said, we still got plenty of time to really dive heavy into free agency. But, you know, I just kind of want to take a 30,000 foot view and get your take on it. And The other side of the ball, I think offensive line, I think the center position, I feel like this offensive line, if Kenyon Green can take that next step forward in this system, I think this team is potentially a center away from being relatively good offensive line, top half of the league, top 12, that kind of thing like that. Questenberry's not it. Britt, he's going to retire, and this team, and there's really only two centers that are going to probably fit in this type of scheme, which is Bradbury out of Minnesota, and then Ethan Posick out of Cleveland, and then the center out of Carolina, Bozeman. I think he's more of a power scheme guy. I'm not really sure he would fit in this type of that West Coast zone scheme, but is that kind of your read on the situation with the offensive line, that they're on the cusp? They just
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, I was doing some research when I was doing my my thing on D'Amico Ryans that dropped, I believe, yesterday. I looked at the offensive line. They only allowed 38 sacks, which is 13th fewest in the NFL. So like that's pretty good. Like they basically had a 1,000-yard running back and Dameon Pierce. Like it's not like Dameon Pierce good all by himself. So the line is actually like in a smooth spot to where like a guy like, let's say you draft Bryce Young, right? Bryce Young has to go to a spot where the O-line is good. He's just not big enough to handle an O-line that's not, like some guys like Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, those guys were able to play behind bad offensive lines to start their career and still produce at a high level. Bryce probably won't be that guy because Bryce is 5'10", 190, 195. So you don't want to put your young quarterback under that type of pressure anyway, because you have two outliers. Doesn't mean you want to make that the norm. So I completely agree with you that if they improve the center spot, they could take that next step. I would say go to the draft route if you can find a guy, because then you can get them at a cost. First, most centers don't go first round anyway. Like Tyler Linderbaum was considered one of the best center prospects in years, and he didn't go to top 15, I believe. So you won't have to, draft one in the first round, and you can get one in the second, third, maybe fourth round. That could be a day one starter. You can get high value contract-wise on those guys, not paying them a dime. Because you're going to have to pay Tunsil again. You're going to have to possibly pay your right tackle. So you're going to have a lot of resources allocated onto the offensive line to begin with. So it'd be better to, go the draft route so you can get some, I guess you could say some, have more cap flexibility. Versus if you go and pay for a center on the open market, you're going to pay almost, 10 a year. Or not 10 a year, but, 5 to 10 a year, which doesn't seem like much. But when you add it up, it can be, across the roster, it can be a decent amount. I mean, you have Connor McGovern from the Jets, who obviously ran this same exact type of scheme. He could be a plug-and-play guy. Now, he's exactly, he's an average center. Like, it's going to be solid. Is it going to, do too much? Is it going to do, mess up plays? But that's another option. I know you didn't mention him, but that's another option.
Yeah, he was on the list. I think he turns 30 this year, but we've seen offensive linemen are able to play a little bit longer in their age versus other positions. And he was one name that's been on my list. I think my assessment is right in line with yours, that he's a plug and play. He's not going to be flashy. He's not going to make huge mistakes, but he's not going to be one of the anchor points on that line as well. But he's not going to cost you games, but he's not going to win you games per se. So, that would kind of be my read on that. That'd be kind of be like option 3, something like that. But the centers in the draft, there's a couple of good ones, and then it really drops off pretty quick from my initial read. So maybe things will change in the next 80 something days. But you mentioned Bryce Young, so I got to ask you, who's DJ's QB1 on the draft board right now?
QB1. I have to dive in some more, but I really did like what I saw from CJ Stroud in that Georgia game, and I wasn't that much of a Stroud fan going into that game, but he basically showed you everything that you want to see in a quarterback. So I think I would still lean towards Bryce, because Bryce has a longer track record of playing at that type of level on the big stage, doing the off-script stuff, being able to play within rhythm and still be able to, slice you up. Obviously, Stroud can play within rhythm. That's what he does a lot, but we just never saw like the off-script stuff, that playmaking ability. So obviously, do you weigh that one game
Yeah.
Let that outweigh everything else you saw from Bryce. Not really too sure, but I would say Bryce 1A, Stroud 1B, and Anthony Richardson 3. To be honest, I just wish that, Richardson just had a little bit more production to really be able to justify him at 2. Because just someone at 2, you can't really whiff on that. X in New York.
Yeah. And you've got to have a kind of a bridge option in place, whether Mills is that guy or not. You got to have some type of bridge option in place for Richardson. I think I'm not opposed to taking him back, middle of the first round, back half of the first round. If you didn't take QB at 2 and you move back from 12 or something like that,
right?
Definitely not opposed to that. If you have another option in place to carry over until he's ready, he seems to have quite a bit of a ceiling according to many of the
ceiling.
Yeah.
His ceiling is basically top 5, top of the talent. Just his floor is bottom 5 also.
Yeah. That's a big space to fill in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of wanted to get your take on that. And, got a lot of questions up on the board. And, if you just hopped in, DJ Bien-Aime from ESPN, who covers the Texans, is joining us tonight. This is the Cap and Trade Show. I'm your host at TexansCap. Follow me on Twitter. If you've been posting up questions in the comments, just hang tight. I will throw them up on the board for DJ to answer, and I'll give my feedback as well on whatever we can get to. Got about 10, 15 more minutes here. So I got a couple more questions for DJ before we get to the questions. Do you have, speaking of the draft, I mean, I saw one thing on Twitter when I think Landry was kind of talking about veteran quarterbacks. I had pitched the idea, wasn't my idea, it was more just an option of Derek Carr. And I think you responded no pretty much to like any veteran quarterback options instead of drafting a quarterback. Is that kind of the path that you're leaning towards at this point in time? Is no, not a veteran quarterback. Let's get a young guy. Let's draft the future and head down that path.
Yeah, the only guy I could see is Jimmy G. Just that's it. But more as the bridge guy where you're not paying him anything.
Mm-hmm. That's
it. You're like a Mitch Trubisky type deal. That's it. Derek Carr, you bring Derek Carr to the Texans, the Texans weren't a quarterback away from competing in the AFC. They might have been a quarterback away from winning the division, but that's because the division was bad.
Yeah,
that's it. So, I was anti that because again, you don't get the benefits of having a quarterback on a rookie contract, and being able to stockpile that roster with young talent and veteran talent. And being able to, you see what Philly's doing right now, I'm saying, granted, there's various ways because obviously Mahomes is also in the Super Bowl and he's not on a rookie contract either, he's getting a lot of money, but obviously he's top 5 quarterbacks to ever exist. So, I'm always, go young, try to build it up that way and hope that you strike on the quarterback, because again, you get a guy like Derek Carr, we saw what he was in Oakland when the roster wasn't that good and he couldn't lift them above that. So there's no reason to think that if you bring him in at that money, you'll be able to add the pieces around him to help elevate him on top of the fact and him elevate you along with that. So that doesn't make any sense.
Nah, I hear you. I've been on the Bryce Young train since about October, and I don't plan on jumping off. But I do throw up the random suggestions on Twitter, and that's not, for the folks that read that, that's not me advocating for those ideas. I just like to propose options out there to see what the other paths, the team maybe will take whenever I mention Jacoby Brissett versus Derek Carr or any other paths. But I'm very much a Bryce Young and let's go. And hopefully he's there at number 2, and hopefully the team doesn't have to move up to number 1 to get around it. But we'll have to plenty of time for those smoke and mirror games. Let's see here. So we'll DJ, if you can, let's do a few questions from the folks here, and then I got one off topic question for you at the end. Would the West Coast offense suit Davis Mills if we don't pick a QB in the draft?
I would say so. I would say so because Davis prefers to play So let me break it down. Based on what my knowledge is on what offensive coordinators from that system prefer to do, they're gonna have like they don't really. It's called a peer progression where you kind of read left to right instead of like some offenses you got to read the safety. Like you want to read the safety, see what coverage, what shell they're in, so you can know kind of an idea what coverage they're in, things of that nature, and go from there. But in the West Coast, in the Kyle Shanahan, they kind of want you to kind of focus on like a player or a couple players and kind of read off of them. So the coverage sometimes may not matter. And then if let's say your original read is open because off of what that player is doing, you kind of throw the ball into that space. So a lot of it's hands-on with the offensive coordinator where they're trying to like basically guide you through the play. That's kind of why like, Jared Goff couldn't take that next step with the Rams because like once like Sean McVay was like, all right, I kind of need you to like take that next step and kind of like create for me if I'm not necessarily correct, because eventually like defensive coordinators kind of pick up on your tendencies and they take away that initial first read based off of what you're trying to do, and they kind of counter that and go from there. Which is why they kind of had some issues with Vic Fangio's defense based off what I've read, because and Staley to a lesser extent because they're really good at disguising completely. Back to my original point. I think yes, Mills could fit that because Mills, if his first read is there, the play is cooked up the exact way it's designed, he can execute that. We saw that against the Raiders, right? The Raiders, Pat Hamilton was in his bag. He was consistently ahead of the Raiders defense coordinator Pat Graham's blitzes and man coverages, and he was consistently finding plays to counter that. So if you do that, Mills can most definitely do that issue. Like when that first read isn't there, what can Mills do then? So.
Yeah, and I mean, for the most part, could he do it? Yeah, I mean, he could do it. I think I'm not trying to compare him against Brock Purdy, but we see you see what different style quarterbacks are, and that offense is still continue to do well, but they also have tons of playmakers as well on that offense, and that's something Houston still needs to work on. So, but let's just let's hope. I don't know what the fan base's reaction would be if the team tried to Davis.
Would be over really quick.
And I agree with you. And I do not foresee the McNairs and this organization killing all of this momentum that they have by trotting him back out there. It's it is what it is. It's the team is taking a new direction, and Davis Mills will be just a very good, low-priced backup for this team for the next 2 years. And maybe he'll find a different option next year. I'm definitely not for trading him or anything like that. I think he's a great backup option, and the team probably can sign a very low cost older veteran to bring into camp, things like that. But that would be our take on that. Let's see here. Gridiron says give a bag of money to Ron Payne. Yeah, we talked about that. I mean, my buddy over at PFF, Brad Spielberger, he pegged Deron Payne at $20 million a year with 55 guaranteed over 4 years. And that's, but like DJ said, if you got that rookie contract at the quarterback position, then that allows you to reallocate all that, available cap dollars to other positions on the roster. So, I think, and then Javon Hargrave, they got him pegged at like $18.3 million per year, but he's, I think, 30 or 31. So he's a little bit older than Deron Payne, but those are going to probably be your top two interior guys. I don't have any problem giving him the bag of money. If he fits the scheme and the coaching staff and everybody agrees that he'll work well here, then, by all means, go for it.
By all means.
And Ryan thinks Deron Payne's getting the tag. I saw that a few times today, and I have to kind of wait and see. I mean, they've got a lot of money invested in Jonathan Allen, who plays next to Payne on that, at the defensive tackle spot. They're sitting around $8.5 million in cap space over in Washington. They've got some money they can free up with Montez Sweat, maybe do an extension on him. They can probably do some restructures, hopefully they don't want to try to touch the Carson Wentz contract, but if they had to dive into that one, they could. Jonathan Allen, they could do a restructure, Curtis Samuel, Charles Leno, things like that. So But I just have a hard time believing they're going to tag him unless they're trying to tag and trade, which I think is a shitty thing to do. And it's against the CBA, but nobody ever wants to challenge it. All right, let's see here. Mr. Crumpler says, which positions have free agent markets you would avoid if you were Houston? I would avoid running back. Everybody knows I don't like to pay running backs. I think this is a very strong running back class from free agency. And then there's and this is a pretty good running back draft class as well. So I'm not in the camp of spending $12 million a year on a Josh Jacobs or Tony Pollard or something like that. I mean, they're great running backs, don't get me wrong, but I just think that's money that should be spent elsewhere. And I don't know if you have any different opinion on that, DJ.
No. I mean, you already got Damian Pierce.
Yeah. I mean, he can't be a bell cow though, right?
I know. You just try something.
He's going to need help, but you don't need to spend that kind of investment at the position. I think there's other players, maybe a little bit down the list, Raheem Mostert. I don't know if Deontay Foreman would fit a zone style scheme, but he's a player. Maybe Darnus Johnson out of Cleveland if they let him walk. Jet McKinnon, who has some time in the San Francisco system before he went to KC. But Jeff Wilson's also with Miami. There's Trenton Cannon. I know he didn't play at all this year, but he still might have a little bit of burst. And I think there's plenty of options to look at beyond the top 4 or 5 running backs would be my one position to avoid. And then the other position to avoid is going to be free agency because there's nobody there and you're going to end up overpaying for somebody who's a wave 2 type of player.
Yeah, no, I agree there.
Let's see here. So is Petre staying at free safety in this scheme? I'll leave that one to you.
Good question. That's a good question.
Guess we'll have to wait and see.
Actually, that's one guy. Okay, so in this scheme, the safeties are interchangeable, so it doesn't matter. They'll both play. Some will be both times they'll be a free. Sometimes one be a free, one be in the box, and vice versa. So they're interchangeable.
Okay. So, anything on tight ends?
How do you feel about Jordan Akins? I like what I saw from him down the stretch. Obviously you grab somebody, but I think if you go into it again with Jordan Akins, because I think he had 5 receiving touchdowns. I think you'll be okay. You do have to upgrade eventually, but good. I mean, there's not a tight end that can block and catch. They're never gonna hit the market. Right. Those guys do not hit the market because it's impossible to find those guys. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not sure if the course has been set for Brevin Jordan. I just not sold on him. So I think Jordan Akins is definitely somebody you try to re-sign back on another 1-year deal for $3.5-4 million. The draft has some popular names on late day 1, early day 2, but you still need that inline type of tight end. I know Akins can do it a little bit. But I think the team definitely needs to find a good blocking tight end to pair with Akins and whatever else tight end, whether it's a draft or a free agent. And you can definitely spend some money there. I mean, I don't think, we see Gesicki in Miami and what happened in that scheme. So I really don't peg him as an option, and Dalton Schultz is going to be top of the market free agent when it comes to it. I was big on him. I was excited to potentially look at him, but I feel like there's other areas to invest instead of investing heavily in free agency in the tight end spot. Draft wise, I think there's Kincaid and I'm trying to remember that other kid's name. Yeah, we'll dig into it when he gets here. But I mean, like you said, Jordan Akins, I'm definitely not opposed to bringing him back on another 1-year deal, $3 or $4 million, 1.5 guaranteed, something like that. And, he'd probably be another good contributor. He stayed healthy all year and, definitely put up some numbers. And I don't see how that would decrease with this scheme and with this system. What would y'all do at pick 12 from Joe Nathan? There's so much you could do there. There's a lot. I mean, you could trade back. You can go wide receiver. You can go edge. And, I think we'll have a ton of time to get into that. So,
yeah, that one depends on what they do in free agency.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see here if there's any other. There's a couple other questions, but I think majority of them we've either covered or not stuff that we can really answer yet. Why is Stream not sponsored by Coke Zero yet? I don't know. Brian, as my agent, you can seek out that deal. All right. So before we get you out here, DJ, I had noticed it was a couple weeks back. This is completely off topic, off sports, everything. You had sent out a tweet about PS5 and Dragon Ball game.
Correct.
And it made me wonder, are you a Dragon Ball fan?
Dragon Ball? I never watched Dragon Ball, but I watched Dragon Ball Z and Super.
That's what I mean in general. Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah. I mean, I was watching Super the other day.
Good.
Yeah, I always randomly rewatch Super from time to time. I like Super. I'm waiting for the new season to come out. Obviously, I don't read the manga because the manga is kind of that's cheating. I don't use that word. I like to not know what's gonna happen. Like I already know at the end, like Goku might come and save the day or whatever. But
yeah,
I prefer not to know. So I'm waiting on them to make a new game for the P5 because the last one they made, I didn't like it too much. I think it was on the P4. I didn't like it too much. Kakarot because it was single player. And I don't really care to play single player anymore. I like what makes the game fun for me is being able to fight other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I already know the story. I watched it a million times. Yeah,
it's good to know that I've got another Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super fan in the press box now because I'm a huge fan of it. So it's good to know that somebody else up there has the same interest.
Man.
Well, I appreciate the time tonight, sir. Covered a lot of ground. If you're not following DJ, does a ton of good work, working for ESPN at DJ Bien-Aime on Twitter. And like I said, sir, I appreciate the time and I appreciate the insight. And I'm sure we'll talk again here in the near future.
All right, cool, man. Appreciate you having me on.
All right. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and close it down. And with that, let's see here. One thing I wanted to mention before we bolt out of here. Another great show. Appreciate it, Truth. So next show is going to be Wednesday for sure. I've got a good guest coming up. It's Mr. Randy Mueller, who is hopefully, if his schedule holds up on me. He's the GM of XFL Seattle Dragons, I think. Works for, does a podcast on The Athletic, former NFL GM for Minnesota and the Saints. So really excited to chat with him next week, get some contract philosophy talk and salary cap talk and really kind of geek out with him. Try to get his outside perspective on Houston. So, definitely come back next Wednesday for that. I'm trying to see if the schedule works for a late Friday evening solo show. I've been doing some prep on Agba Okoronkwo contract. I've got some thoughts on that. So if I can squeeze in the time, Friday night or Saturday night, obviously, we have to do these things pretty late. We'll try to do another contract building session. I had a lot of fun doing the Laramie Tunsil contract session that we did last Wednesday. If you didn't get to see that, check the YouTube channel, the CapandTrade YouTube channel, and you'll see the Tunsil contract show. And I kind of want to do something similar. It seemed to get a lot of good feedback from everybody who watched that and wanted to ask for to do a few more of those. I'm getting a lot of requests on Titus Howard. Don't think we're there yet with him. I'm not sure the team's going to look at an extension with him before the season starts. But if we do a contract show on Howard, it'd probably be after the draft. But I'm looking at, like I said, Okoronkwo. I think he's a good extension candidate for this team, and he's going to get probably some suitors on the free agency market as well. So I'll be a lookout on the Twitter timeline. If Twitter continues to work, who knows if it's going to work tomorrow or not, or the next day. But keep an eye out. If I'm able to get that show together and get the numbers together in time, then we'll do a little Q&A and building another contract, maybe Friday or Saturday night. So I think that's about it for tonight. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I appreciate all the questions, and we will see y'all very soon. If not, we'll see you next Wednesday. Everybody have a good evening. Thanks.